In this 68th episode of the Misaal podcast, you will listen to my conversation with Syed Azfar Hussain. He's the project director at National Incubation Center, Hyderabad. Let's listen in. Welcome to the Misaal podcast. Asfar, how are you?
I'm good.
Thanks for joining me today. Really excited to have someone on, of course, from Hyderabad. Hyderabad is a place where my dad was born.
Oh, wow.
So my family, extended family, is still in Hyderabad. So let's get started with a quick introduction. Please tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you find yourself working at NIC?
So I come from a family of medical doctors. I was born in Hyderabad but raised in Karachi. So my entire schooling and university is from Karachi. But the entire family is they are all medical doctors. My parents are medical doctors. My siblings are medical doctors. So medicine is all around me. I wanted to do anything else than to be in some of the clinics or in hospitals or be a doctor, to be honest. I started off, after doing my MBA, I started off in a media publication. It was a small media house. And then I realized that if you don't have a mass comm degree, you have those business essentials, those business knowledge that can help you with e-commerce, with commerce, with diplomatic beats. In journalism, you call them beats. It was very easy for me to kind of have that editorial part in terms of the business side of it. So I started off from a publication, then moved to the hospitality side of businesses. And then eventually, I've also worked and consulted a few of the leading event companies in Pakistan. But the incubation side of things, or the ecosystem where you have startups, that started off roughly a decade back when I was part of the first science-based incubator that was launched at HEJ Research Center in Karachi. So that was the first science-based incubation center, and it was 2014-15 when the project started. I joined in right after the project started, and I served there for around 2.5 years. And then these NICs started bidding for NICs, and the eventual process where some of those NICs were allocated to the companies that are managing it. So I was part of the founding team of NIC Karachi. I stayed there for 4 years. And then now I'm leading the incubation center at Hyderabad, and it's now 18 months leading the NIC Hyderabad. So it's been a great journey in terms of learning, and having that journalistic background. I'm very keen to make communities, keen to have entrepreneurs linked to different networks. Most of the incubation that is happening in Pakistan, most of the startups are at a very early stage of business. Most of them are just about to start their business operations. Few of the businesses are at the acceleration level. So it's been a great ride coming to these NICs and seeing them grow as well.
It's very interesting that you mentioned that you are out there building communities and stuff, and you are the only person, and I'll be very honest, that I've seen out there who doing stuff for startups, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's LinkedIn. I actually don't know who else is running any of the other NICs, so I'll give you that you're quite actively out there promoting NICs. So you mentioned the public-private partnership sort of model that NIC has. Can you touch a little bit on that and tell me a little bit more about what does that mean and how does it work out for practical purposes?
About the NIC overall, the NIC model. NIC family is about 8 incubators. They plan to launch another vertical-centric NIC, which will be on gaming and animation in Lahore and in Karachi. But we have NICs at 8 different cities of Pakistan, all major cities, including Hyderabad, Faisalabad, Rawalpindi, and 4 provincial capitals that are Lahore, Karachi, Quetta, Peshawar, and the federal capital, Islamabad. So you have NICs at every major city, every major town in Pakistan. And the public-private model operates in a way that Ignite, which runs all the NICs, is funded by the Ministry of IT and managed also by the Ministry of IT. But Ignite also has an independent structure in a way that it's a Section 42 company where some of the independent companies that work with government, but have a different kind of a structure where you have independent board. Just like that, Ignite has an independent board as well as funding that is independent of the Ministry of IT, and it comes from telcos. 0.5% of telcos' gross revenue is Ignite's funding. So it's a good money in terms of major telcos having their revenues into Ignite. And there's another organization, government organization, which is a Universal Services Fund. 1.5% is with the USF, and 0.5% of the gross telcos revenue is with the Ignite. So Ignite rebranded itself as National Technology Fund. It used to be known as the ICT R&D Fund, but then it branded itself into the National Technology Fund. The National Technology Fund funds not just the NICs, but different other initiatives like the Digi Skills Initiative that has freelancers on board. Then it funds the FYPs at different universities. Then it has other programs as well as giving different kinds of scholarships to students as well. So these NICs are completely funded by Ignite, but the model is such that it will be managed by private players, and this management will be given after a transparent bidding process. So a bidding process takes place. You have the RFPs, you submit proposals to the RFPs, and then any consortium or any lead bidder that wins those management rights then eventually runs those NICs for 5 years. So in our case, in Hyderabad's case, this is a consortium led by PTCL and LMKT. And PTCL is the lead bidder, so they are running the NIC Hyderabad. LMKT runs NIC Karachi and Peshawar at the moment, but it will be rebidded soon, so there will be other players as well. There are other private players for Lahore, Quetta, and other centers. So it's more of a public-private partnership where management is entirely private, but funded by government. So you have the government checks as well, but at the same time, you have private independence as well, so that startups can be facilitated in a better way because private players are more flexible. You have less bureaucracy. You need to build, like we started off our conversations with communities. So you need that flexibility of approach. And then eventually some of those private players like us, in case of LFKT, you can then eventually fund or invest in some of these startups like LMKT did with one of the NIC Karachi startups, Farndar. So that's the entire kind of modus operandi of these NICs where publicly managed, it's privately managed but publicly funded.
Regardless of who is in power, your funding is not affected by political turmoil or anything related to that.
Okay, so most of these NICs, the first 5 of them, were launched during the past tenure of the PMLN government. And the tenure was in the last year. Syed Azfar Hussain was the PM. It continued during the entire tenure of Imran Khan, and then the tenure of PM Shehbaz Sharif. And now you have another government in the making, and you see these NICs coming up with different RFPs. So it has been a good process in terms of these NICs have not stopped. And the Ignite, since it's also an independent company in the government framework, it also works independently because you have directors and BOD from the private sector as well. So you can see it still has some bureaucracy, but independence as well. It has the flexibility as well of a private organization where decision making is done regardless of political outcome.
So now that you have described, how NICs work, I would love to learn about what the process is like for selecting startups. Can you please shed some light on that?
Usually, the intake is twice in a year for most of these NICs. So we advertise it mostly digitally on digital platforms as well as through our partner organizations. Most of us have a newsletter base as well. So we give a kind of an open call for startups to submit their applications across. And it's a process where, for instance, even in Hyderabad, we receive over 300, around 250 to 300 applications. In bigger towns, in Karachi and Sabah, they have 5, 600, 700 applications coming in. Then there's an initial sorting of applications process, mostly done by the NIC team, because we want those startups that have some form of in terms of seriousness, as well as a basic pitch deck, what they want to do, a blurb in terms of explaining their idea in a tweet. So you get the basic information, and then those let's say the next, if we shortlist around 100 from a bunch of 250 applicants, then those 100 applications are then reviewed and judged by independent industry mentors, which we call them judges. Some of them are entrepreneurs, some of them are academics, some of them are industry professionals. So we have an independent panel that are kind of judging them in terms of their pitching, in terms of their goals, and then eventually we interview them and select them. So each NIC has a slight process change, but mostly it takes out twice a year. Independent panels, you have interview from the project director, the project team, as well as independent judging process. You need to just reach these NICs digitally, but at the same time, you have the NIC teams that, in terms of the entire year calendar, we mark such events like different outreach activities across cities in terms of attracting best talent. So you have a talent pool as well that is kind of headhunted in advance as well, and then you encourage them to follow the process and apply.
So, what kind of support are we talking about in terms of services provided or financial support? Can you please talk a little bit about that?
The current model of NICs, and this was also evolved with, and I'll share that later. But most of these NICs are initial idea stage or early stage businesses, incubation centers, where the startups are at a very initial stage of their company formation. You have 2 or 3 founders, and there are maybe a team of 8 people or 10 people. So obviously, most of them need a space. So we give them free space for at least 3 to 4 founders. And after that, if someone has 5 or 6, 7 members, we have a very subsidized rate for them to have that co-working form of environment. But at the same time, we give 3 people absolutely free access to the facility in terms of using it as a space. Then we give them mentoring in terms of a one-to-one interaction with different industry experts and coaching as well. But at the same time, most of these NICs run a curriculum. In Karachi and Peshawar, there's an agreement with the Founder Institute, and the Founder Institute curriculum is followed. In Hyderabad, we have this partnership with a Pakistani company led by Hassan Syed that gives us curriculum by Aspire Pakistan, which is an angel network. So it's a localized curriculum. So most of them go through this curriculum. You have coaching and mentoring on the sideline, and then you have a space that is offered free. And with that, the network to reach to different international and national events like GITEX, Leap, Web Summit. Obviously, a criteria and a selection process is followed. Anyone, be it from NIC Hyderabad or Peshawar or Karachi, they are shortlisted through our funding body, Ignite, and then sent to these events as well. So you have national and international events, and then they are trained to have later on in their journey on the investment side of it. So most of these NICs have 1 or 2 investor summits, most of them even 3 or 4 every quarter or every 6 months. They have an investor summit or a demo day for startups. So this investment readiness has also worked on those startups, especially in their later stage of their incubation journey in the 4th or 5th month, where their pitch decks and the data room is also managed so that they kind of pitch to investors as well. So mostly it's hand holding, and there are no stipends at the NIC. There's no stipend model. We don't take equity. We have a separate arrangement in terms of a startup going on investment and working with LNKT in our case and in other groups. But the program does not take any equity. It's equity free incubation since it's government funded, so it's equity free. It has curriculum, it has coaching and mentoring, it has different events that we send them through. It has obviously the community and working with different startups, and then this investment readiness part of it. So mostly that's the focus of this program.
How do you look at these startups and figure out, okay, this startup is going to be successful after the curriculum is finished or after they graduate the incubator program? How do you figure out, like, do you have any KPIs where you look at, okay, this startup came with like 2 customers and now they have like 20 customers?
So yes, KPIs are really important in terms of an increase in revenue. We have one also KPI where we want them to have that investability perspective in mind, but obviously not all of them are funded. But yes, revenues and increase in employment is one of the most critical things that we focus on. And then obviously their unit metrics, the unit economics makes sense as well in terms of having better, if not 3:1 ratio, but good CAC LTV ratio as well, which we really work on them, kind of bringing their cost down as well, acquisition of their customers. So what is focused eventually is, and it varies from geography to geography. If I purely look at Hyderabad, I really want these startups to not only just have their MVP or product ready, but to have their, just like you mentioned as an example, to have a increasing customer base, because with pre-revenue startups are not graduated even from the Hyderabad program. That we have decided from day one. The startups should be at revenue and should have that traction of in terms of employment, to have a growing employment base, as well as that investability part of it. These 3 areas mainly. Yes, the focus remains on increasing revenue and the employment side.
Dealing with startups at such an early stage startups, I mean, especially the one that are at the idea phase, come with their own different challenges, right? Sometimes their idea might be good, but it's not the proper team or the correct team that can execute it. So how do you, like, what is it that you help a startup with during that incubation phase, where you, at least, even if you don't believe in the idea, for example, they have passed the application process and everything, you just think that the idea might not be for the team, or the team is not that great for the idea, what what do you see the biggest challenge for such startups initially when it comes to NIC?
Because of our learnings from NIC Karachi and other incubation centers, I'll be very honest and brutal with this. We usually incubate founders. We incubate ideas. Obviously, the founders have those ideas, but the founder quality really matters in terms of having a good overall startup base at any of the incubation space. So it's easier for a good founder even to make him realize, or he or she realizes it immediately or sooner or later, that they need to have a pivot or they need to have a big change in their overall strategy. So having right founders is our focus, and that's not easy to have a good set of founders working on an idea. If I give you an example of changing ideas, this usually happens when the startup has some type of or some form of experience in doing or in working with at a software house or with some sort of services business. These businesses are easily tweak their ideas. They are open to coachability as well as change in terms of market dynamics and different factors. And they're easy for coaching as well. Not many pivots that we have seen so far at NIC Hyderabad, but what we have seen is definitely change of strategies. I can give you one example of a startup that started off as a basic learning management system. They soon realized that their demand was more of creating those platforms for some of the corporate organizations that require similar sort of database management, and they quickly pivoted themselves into a data management company. And it's it might not be a startup, but it's a services based company now, and they are happy with this. And we are okay with a startup pivoting into a services company rather than just failing their idea and try something that has little or no market. So we see pivots, but we also want to have those founders that are more focused and have a strategy to start with in advance, so that even their change is kind of in a systematic way.
Can you tell me a little bit more about like what kind of startups are you seeing when it comes to the applications? Of course, you filter the applications and then you have a select few startups. Like what kind of startups are applying and what kind of startups end up making through your criteria?
So it depends again. It depends on geographies, but purely if we talk about Hyderabad's perspective, most of the startups are aiming at e-commerce and building marketplaces. But then you have certain verticals that are more targeted in terms of edtech and health tech in Hyderabad. But if you so since we are not only focused on incubating startups from Hyderabad only, it can be in different parts of Sindh, but at the same time, we have startups from Karachi, we have startups from Lahore, we have some of the expatriates that have incubated their startups as well. So, yes, it is closer to the, you can say, the most favorite verticals of most of the Pakistani entrepreneurs that are either working on fintech, logistics, and e-commerce. But in Hyderabad, it's mostly e-commerce marketplaces, and then some of them are really working on different verticals like VR. We have 3 startups that are working on VR. We have some AI-led businesses. We have few businesses that are purely on agri-tech, because you have the agri economy that is around the Hyderabad region. So you have some good agri-techs coming in. But if you say that the most favorite area or the best, you can say the talent is across e-commerce and marketplace.
I know this might be a difficult question for you to answer because I don't want you to get in trouble by saying what you're about to say. But do you have any favorite startups that have graduated recently, maybe in previous cohorts, that you just have like a you just love the idea, you love the founders, and you think they would be doing big things?
Oh wow! So no, that's really tough, obviously, because others might be annoyed with my favoritism. But in terms of our graduated batch, and in terms of startups doing really well, I would like to kind of name 3 or 4 of them. So we have one really good startup from Hyderabad, and that's misaal. It's a VR based startup. They have one of very good cricketing product. It's by the name of Final Overs. It's one of the most highly rated games on Oculus, and it has really made great mark in terms of having a product, and that too on VR and a cricket game. So their only competition is coming from another game maker in India, and no one else is even closer in terms of building games on VR, and that too on cricket, which all Pakistanis and South Asians love. So they have really been successful in building that product. And since they had this before building this, they have a services background, and their services side of business is also doing really well in terms of building real good collaborations across the globe. So Mixir is one. Then we have a really high potential bioenergy startup which makes pellet, because there's biomass pellets, because there's a shortage of natural gas in most areas of Pakistan, especially during winters. and some of the factories and industries that struggle to have their energy challenges met by different sources. So biomass is one of good alternatives to them. So Park Bioenergy has really grown as a company in terms of being just a very small operations of kind of supplying those needs, biomass energy solutions to small vendors in Hyderabad, now talking to big players and groups across Pakistan. So this company has really grown. And then we have some of the very good, it's more of a social enterprise model, but it has a good AI integration into it. The startup is by the name of Better, and it is led by one of our most promising female entrepreneurs, Aisha Amit. So she's also has done really well in terms of promoting female health and hygiene, especially across Sindh. So she's celebrated all over Pakistan, as well as she was under the UN 30 under 30 as well. So there's some good news in terms of these startups. And then few of the startups raised as well. Agri Dunia, I would like to mention them. Unfortunately, they could not sustain their operations. And because of the floods in Sindh, they couldn't handle that credit pressure, that crunch that they really faced. But they were a good team overall. So we have like 4 or 5 great teams coming out of Hyderabad only, and then some of the new batches. So we have touched and crossed 100 companies now, and some of them have done really well in terms of business and growth.
More recently, there was an interim government, that caretaker government, that took the reins over from PDM, and then they have a different IT minister who went ahead with a lot of different sort of programs for IT industry and stuff. One of the programs there was, of course, the startup fund, and there are a lot. I mean, I tried to visit the website for the startup fund. I was not able to access it. Maybe it was down. Maybe it's not fully functional. But can you tell me a little bit more about that aspect of how that's going to work out now that the new government will take over, and if that startup fund is going to survive this transition?
The startup fund will survive because obviously, like we have mentioned earlier, Ignite has survived. All the projects of Ignite has survived. So the startup fund is also will be also under the management of Ignite. But why it has not started? Yes, there is a delay, and the reason is that it has been passed in principle by the cabinet, and then eventually the decision making that runs through the Ignite. For most of the government projects, you need to create a project head, a project, the entire structure around a project. So this portion of it is now currently being developed at the ministry. So we will have, we are towards the end of February 2024. Hopefully we would see this startup fund launching, if not by March, because March is mostly Ramzan and post Eid, or maybe around late April, early May. So the functioning of it will start a bit late, but all the groundwork has been done. It's the hiring of the team and the project initiation that has to be started, because the startup fund and the Bridge Start, which is more of having our startups facilitated to different incubators and accelerators across the globe, that will also start in parallel. So these two programs, the startup fund and the Bridge Start, will start soon, hopefully in 2 months' time. But the groundwork is done. Yes, you will not immediately see some of the decisions or the team, but this process is currently under way. So,
Okay,
start.
that's really good to know. I want to talk to you about more like big picture about the ecosystem. So, how do you see the ecosystem right now, the startup ecosystem in Pakistan specifically, when it comes to funding? Because I follow funding very keenly, so my interest has always been in funding. I have seen, of course, there was no funding, at least disclosed funding in January. There's nothing yet in February. Where do you see the startup ecosystem going this year and the future years? How do you feel about overall the pulse in terms of the economy and stuff?
So obviously, when you have transition governments, when you have not really political stability that is around us, it obviously impacts the overall investment dynamics and then startups in terms of investments, in terms of their direction. But if I look at purely from a perspective of startups into the system, and then uh, what are what is we as incubators or as the ecosystem see, I think so we have this quick realization that was missing. And since you follow funding, that since we most of our VCs are driven from either people, I don't like the word Wapistani, but people who were expatriates or uh, coming from different parts of the globe, and kind of having interest in Pakistan, or VCs having their base outside Pakistan. We have the realization is all over Pakistan, and especially among big conglomerates, that it's essential to have more angels, more angel investment that should come from Pakistan, and those leading angel investors should be more locally trained, as well as knowing the local dynamics. Those angels should come forward, as well as there should be demand for VCs and other parallel investment tools or vehicles for startups. You can see organizations like Accelerate Prosperity working with startups and SMEs at a good pace currently. So you have those alternate debt financing as well, in terms of if VC money is not coming to Pakistan, you have debt financing for startups. Then you have some of the angels or angel initiatives coming up. So yes, I agree. It's tough time. You don't see big announcements happening. You don't see great startup teams formulating. But at the same time, the groundwork is at a better stage. What I see, let's say 4 or 5 years back, you have this realization that you need to have more angels. You need to have indigenous VC funds. You need to have those mature people doing their startups. You need to have those software companies and those software companies professionals building or making products that are more centric to Pakistan and Pakistani problems. So groundwork is happening. The overall ecosystem is kind of maturing, but not really in terms of, I don't also see much of big announcements or big investments probably in the next 3 to 6 months. It will be more stability and more groundwork during this.
What is next for you in terms of if there's anything that you want to talk about? NIC is doing anything new that there might be trying in the future? Any new projects coming up? And as well as, like, is there anything that I mean, of course, you are more involved in these things. So, is there anything else that the government might be doing to, encourage more entrepreneurship, more startups, more funding, more everything? Are there any projects coming up?
I think that in terms of the NICs overall, we have also matured in terms of our overall model. When I talk about NICs, NICs used to be completely government funded. So now this will change for the upcoming RFP for Lahore and for NIC Karachi. So NIC Lahore and NIC Karachi has this change of 30% contribution from the lead bidder that will not be reimbursed by the government. So it has changed. They want players, they want those leading groups, those businesses, those consortia, those conglomerates to have money in the game, so that they have their skin in the game. they can invest in some of these startups, and they can invest in the ecosystem as well. So it's not just managing those NICs, it will be more of creating those holding companies that eventually we have a structure. We might not get to the likes of Y Combinators and 500 startups soon, but they want those incubators to eventually be like accelerators where you have those partners, where you have a holding company managing all the businesses like assets, like managing assets. So the model of NICs is kind of changing, especially for bigger cities, especially on the KLI, the Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad front. So these NICs are changing for sure. And then what the learnings of these NICs, you know that you have different industries of different potential. We all know that there is a big gaming or gaming developers that are in Pakistan. So that is why the focus of having a vertical centric NIC where you have gaming and animation as a key area of focus for an upcoming NIC that will be only on gaming and animation. Then at the same time, you have something that technology parks are all over the country. So you have startups, you have those services companies, you have good software houses. Each of them need facilitation at different stages. So when you don't have an ecosystem of even good software houses or businesses working together, you will have challenges. So the creation of STZA is a great initiative where you're helping technology companies to work and collaborate, and then you giving them tax breaks and also facilitating them to have better market reach. So you see those science and technology parks coming up as well. So the ecosystem is obviously growing in terms of direction, and so are these NICs in terms of their overall evolution in becoming. Some of them are becoming incubators, from incubators to accelerators, and eventually changing their model as well. These NICs have, in terms of overall ecosystem, have incubated more than 1,500 startups across Pakistan. So now we would see more accelerated companies through these NICs as well. So I think this will bring in more investment, will bring in more businesses that are truly global in nature as well. So hoping for the best.
Sounds good. You are hopeful and very optimistic. That I mean, everyone in the startup ecosystem is supposed to be optimistic and positive. So that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking out the time and talking about the NIC initiatives. It was lovely talking to you. Of course, we'll have you again sometime in the future to talk about more progress that's taken place. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast as much as I enjoyed making it. Please do let me know if you have any guest recommendations, any feedback that can make me better. At the same time, I would really, really appreciate if you could share it with your friends, write me a review. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.